What would you do if you heard knocking from beneath the earth? Tonight, I'm sharing the story of Ethan Cole, a single father who discovered something impossible buried in the woods. This isn't just a rescue story, it's about darkness, desperation, and the thin line between life and death. Stay until the end to see how one moment of courage changed everything, and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. You won't believe what happened next. The mountains didn't forgive mistakes. Ethan Cole had learned that lesson the hard way, carved into his soul through years of fighting fires in these unforgiving peaks, and later through the slow erosion of his marriage, his career, and nearly everything else that had once defined him. Now, at 38, he was just a man trying to keep his daughter warm and his demons at bay, one cold November night at a time. The cabin groaned against the wind as Ethan pulled on his heavy work jacket, the fabric worn thin at the elbows, patches sewn by hands that had once saved lives, but now struggled with the simple mechanics of threading a needle. Through the single-paned window, he could see the first stars piercing through the departing clouds, their light cold and indifferent. The storm had passed 3 hours ago, leaving the world draped in that peculiar silence that only comes after nature has spent its fury. "Daddy?" Lily's voice drifted from inside, small and worried. "Are you going out?" Ethan turned back to see his daughter framed in the doorway, her 7-year-old face illuminated by the flickering light of 3 candles they'd arranged on the kitchen table. She wore her pink fleece pajamas, the ones with the cartoon bears that her mother had bought before everything. Her brown hair hung loose around her shoulders, and she clutched her worn stuffed rabbit against her chest like a talisman. "Just for a bit, sweetheart," Ethan said, forcing warmth into his voice, despite the exhaustion that had settled into his bones like cold water. "The generator's dead, and we need firewood to keep the stove going. I'll be back before you finish coloring that picture." Lily bit her lower lip, a gesture so achingly familiar that Ethan felt his chest tighten. She looked just like Sarah when she did that. Sarah, who had walked out 14 months ago, unable to handle the weight of Ethan's PTSD, his nightmares, the way he'd wake up screaming about fires and bodies, and the smell of burning flesh. Sarah, who had chosen a new life in the city over the broken man her husband had become. "Can't we just go to bed early?" Lily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "We can stay under all the blankets together, like camping." Ethan crossed the small space between them and knelt down, bringing himself to her eye level. He placed his calloused hands gently on her shoulders, feeling how thin she'd gotten. Money was tight, tighter than he'd ever admit to anyone, especially to the social workers who'd come sniffing around after Sarah had filed her reports about his unstable mental state. "Remember what I always tell you?" he said softly. Lily nodded, her eyes finding his. "Cole family is strong. We take care of each other." "That's right, baby girl. And right now taking care of each other means making sure we don't freeze our butts off tonight." He tried to make it light, playful, but he could see the shadow of fear that never quite left his daughter's eyes these days. She'd grown up too fast, seen too much of her father's struggles, carried burdens no child should have to carry. "Promise you'll be careful?" Lily asked. "Cross my heart," Ethan said, making the gesture across his chest. 15 minutes, tops. You keep working on that picture of the Princess Castle, and when I get back you can show me which tower she lives in." Lily managed a small smile, and Ethan felt the familiar ache of loving someone so much it physically hurt. He stood, grabbed the flashlight from the shelf by the door, checking to make sure the batteries still had juice, and stepped out into the cold November night. The temperature had dropped sharply after the storm, and Ethan's breath came out in thick clouds as he made his way down the porch steps. The moon was nearly full, casting everything in shades of silver and shadow. Their cabin sat at the end of a dirt road that wound through the Cascades, miles from the nearest neighbor, in a pocket of forest so dense that even in daylight the sun struggled to reach the ground. Ethan had bought the place for almost nothing 3 years ago, back when he still had his firefighter's salary and Sarah still believed they could make it work. It needed work. Hell, it needed damn near everything, but it was theirs, or at least it had been. Now it was just his and Lily's, a refuge that sometimes felt more like a prison. He moved around the side of the cabin to where he'd stacked some logs before the storm hit, but most of the wood was soaked through, useless for burning. He'd need to go deeper into the tree line, find deadfall that had been protected by the canopy. The axe was where he'd left it, leaning against the old pine that marked the edge of their property. He hefted it, feeling the familiar weight settle in his hands. The forest at night was its own world, layered with sounds that most people never heard. The rustle of nocturnal animals, the creak of trees settling, the whisper of wind through pine needles. Ethan had learned these sounds during his time as a wildland firefighter, had learned to read the forest like some men read books. It was one of the few things that still brought him peace, this deep understanding of the natural world. He walked about 50 yards into the tree line, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, searching for suitable wood. The storm had brought down several branches, and he found a good-sized limb that would split nicely. He set down his flashlight, positioning it so the beam illuminated his work area, raised the axe, and brought it down hard. The blade bit deep into the wood with a satisfying thunk. He worked methodically, splitting the branch into manageable pieces, falling into the rhythm of the work. Swing, split, stack. Swing, split, stack. It was meditative, requiring just enough concentration to quiet the thoughts that usually plagued him, but not so much that he couldn't keep part of his awareness on his surroundings. He was lining up his fifth swing when he heard it. Knock, knock, knock. Ethan froze, axe raised mid-swing, every muscle in his body suddenly taut. The sound was faint, muffled, but distinct. 3 deliberate knocks, evenly spaced. He waited, holding his breath, wondering if he'd imagined it. The wind moved through the trees. An owl called somewhere in the distance. Then it came again. Knock, knock, knock. Closer this time. Or maybe not closer, maybe just clearer, as if his ears had adjusted to whatever frequency the sound existed on. Ethan slowly lowered the axe, his heart beginning to pound against his ribs. He knew every sound these woods made, and this wasn't one of them. "Hello?" he called out, his voice sounding strange and flat in the cold air. "Is someone there?" Nothing. Just the wind and the trees and the slow drip of water falling from branches. Ethan took a step forward, then another, his boots crunching on the mix of snow and pine needles that carpeted the forest floor. He swept his flashlight beam in a wide arc, searching for what? A person? An animal? He didn't know. The knocking came again, faster now. Knock, 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 knock. And this time Ethan's firefighter training kicked in, that hardwired instinct to move toward danger rather than away from it. The sound wasn't coming from the trees, it was coming from below, from beneath the ground. "What the hell?" Ethan muttered, dropping to one knee. He pressed his ear against the cold earth, his flashlight held to the side, and listened. There was something down there, not the settling of earth or the movement of groundwater or any other natural explanation his mind frantically tried to supply. This was deliberate, rhythmic, desperate. Knock, knock, knock. Pause. Knock, 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 knock. Pause. Knock, knock, knock. It was a pattern, a signal. Someone was trying to communicate. Ethan's blood turned to ice. He jerked back from the ground as if it had burned him, his mind racing through impossible scenarios. A collapsed mine? But there were no mines in this area. A cave-in? No caves either, at least none that he knew of. But that sound, that distinctly human sound, was coming from at least a few feet below the surface. He stood up, breathing hard, his flashlight beam shaking as his hand trembled. For a moment he considered turning around, going back to the cabin, calling the ranger station from the CB radio. Let someone else deal with this. Let someone else figure out what the hell was buried in these woods. But then the knocking came again, faster and more frantic, and Ethan heard something else, a sound so faint he almost missed it. A scream, muffled and distant, but unmistakably a scream. Someone was buried alive down there. "Oh God," Ethan breathed, his mind snapping into crisis mode. "Oh God, oh God." He ran, not away from the sound but toward his truck, parked beside the cabin. His boots pounded against the ground, his breath coming in ragged gasps, his mind already calculating, shovel, flashlight, rope, first aid kit. He'd need all of it. He'd need help too, but the nearest ranger station was 40 minutes away, and whoever was down there didn't have 40 minutes. Lily appeared on the porch as he thundered up the steps. "Daddy, what's wrong?" "Stay inside," Ethan commanded, his voice sharper than he intended. He saw her flinch, saw the fear bloom in her eyes, and he forced himself to soften. "Baby, I'm sorry, but I need you to stay inside and lock the door. Don't come out until I tell you. Can you do that for me?" "But what's happening?" "I don't know yet," Ethan said, already moving toward the truck. "But someone needs help, and I'm the only one who can help them right now. Lock the door, Lily. I'll be right back." He didn't wait to see if she obeyed. He couldn't. Every second mattered now. He yanked open the truck's toolbox, grabbed the folding shovel he kept for emergencies, a coil of rope, a larger flashlight. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, muscle memory from years of rescue operations taking over. As he ran back into the woods, he could hear Lily calling after him, but her voice faded as the trees swallowed him. The knocking was still going when he reached the spot, but it was weaker now, slower. Ethan fell to his knees and pressed his ear to the ground again, trying to pinpoint the exact location. "Hold on," he shouted at the earth. "I'm going to get you out. Just hold on." The knocking stopped. For one terrible moment, Ethan thought he was too late, that whoever was down there had given up, had slipped away. But then it came again. Knock, knock, knock. Directly beneath his left hand. He marked the spot with his flashlight and began to dig. The ground was still soft from the storm, which was both a blessing and a curse. The shovel bit deep with each thrust, but the walls of the hole kept collapsing inward, forcing Ethan to dig wider than he wanted. Sweat poured down his face despite the cold, soaking through his shirt. His shoulders burned. His hands, still not fully recovered from the nerve damage he'd sustained in his last fire, screamed in protest. He ignored it all. Pain was temporary, death was permanent. 6 inches down. 1 foot, 2 feet. The knocking had stopped again, and that terrified Ethan more than anything. He dug faster, throwing dirt aside with a fury born of desperation. His flashlight, propped at an angle, cast wild shadows that made the hole look like a mouth opening in the earth. 3 feet down, his shovel hit something solid. The impact sent a jolt up his arms, and for a moment Ethan thought he'd struck rock. But when he cleared away more dirt, his flashlight beam reflected off something smooth and dark. Wood. Finished wood. "No," Ethan whispered, his stomach turning over. "No, no, no." He knew what this was. He'd seen it before, in movies and nightmares. But finding it here, in reality, buried in the woods behind his cabin, it was impossible. It was insane. It was a coffin. Ethan's hands moved faster now, scraping dirt away from the wooden surface. The coffin was simple, unadorned, made from cheap pine. He could see scratches on the wood, deep gouges where someone had clawed at it from the inside. The knocking had stopped completely now, and the silence was worse than any sound. "Hey!" Ethan shouted, pounding on the wood. "Can you hear me? I'm right here. I'm going to get you out." Nothing. Ethan frantically cleared more dirt, exposing more of the coffin's surface, searching for a way to open it. His flashlight beam caught something, a small square of glass set into the lid, near where the head would be. A viewing window. His hand shook as he cleared the last of the dirt away from the glass. It was fogged from the inside, condensation obscuring whatever lay beneath. Ethan leaned in close, his breath coming in short gasps, and wiped the outside of the glass with his palm. A hand pressed against it from the inside. Ethan jerked back with a shout, his heart nearly exploding in his chest. The hand was small, feminine. The fingers splayed wide against the glass. It moved slightly, fingers twitching, and Ethan realized with a surge of relief that whoever was inside was still alive, but not for long. He could see the way the hand moved, weak, uncoordinated. Oxygen deprivation. He had minutes at best. "I'm getting you out!" he yelled, grabbing the axe he'd dropped nearby. "Cover your face! Move away from the glass!" He didn't know if they could hear him or understand, but he couldn't wait. He raised the axe and brought it down hard on the glass window. The glass spider-webbed, but didn't break. He struck again, putting every ounce of strength into the blow. This time the glass shattered inward, fragments disappearing into the coffin. Ethan dropped the axe and shoved his hands through the opening, grabbing at the wood, pulling and tearing. The pine was cheap, not meant to withstand assault from the outside, and it splintered under his desperate attack. He made the opening larger, then larger still, ripping away chunks of wood until he could reach inside. His hands found fabric, then shoulders, then he was pulling, lifting, dragging whoever it was up through the hole he'd made. She came free all at once, and Ethan fell backward, the woman's body collapsing on top of him. For a moment they lay there in the dirt, both gasping for air. Then Ethan rolled, gently moving her off him, and got his first real look at who he'd saved. She was young, maybe early 30s, with dark hair matted with dirt and sweat. Her skin was pale, almost gray in the flashlight's beam, and her lips had a bluish tinge that Ethan recognized as hypoxia. She wore what had once been an expensive business suit, now torn and filthy. Her hands were bloody, the fingernails broken and torn from clawing at the coffin lid. But she was breathing. Shallow, rapid breaths, but breathing. "Hey," Ethan said, his voice gentler now. He pulled off his jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. "You're safe. You're safe now. I've got you." Her eyes fluttered open, brown eyes wide with terror and confusion. She tried to speak, but only a rasping croak came out. Her hand shot up and grabbed Ethan's shirt, pulling him closer with surprising strength. "Water," she managed to whisper. "I don't have any here," Ethan said, "but my cabin's close. Can you walk?" She tried to nod, but the movement seemed to cost her. Her eyes rolled back, and for a moment Ethan thought she was going to pass out. He couldn't let that happen. He needed to get her warm, get her hydrated, and figure out what the hell was going on. "Stay with me," he said firmly, supporting her shoulders. "What's your name?" "Clara," she whispered. "Clara Wexler." The name meant nothing to Ethan, but the way she said it, with a kind of desperate relief, as if she'd been afraid she might forget her own name, told him everything about what she'd endured. "Okay, Clara, I'm Ethan. We're going to get you out of here, but I need you to help me. Can you try to stand?" With his support, Clara managed to get her legs under her. She was unsteady, swaying like a drunk, but she was upright. Ethan kept one arm around her waist, bearing most of her weight, and reached for his flashlight with the other. That's when he heard the sound of engines in the distance. Clara heard it too. Her entire body went rigid, and her hand clamped down on Ethan's arm with painful force. When he looked at her face, he saw raw terror there, the kind of fear that transcended words. "No," she gasped. "No, no, no. They're coming back. They're coming back to check if I'm dead." "Who?" Ethan demanded. "Who buried you?" But Clara wasn't listening. She was staring through the trees toward the access road that led to Ethan's property, where the sound of engines was growing louder. Headlights flickered through the forest like distant lightning. "They'll kill us both," Clara said, her voice rising in pitch. "They'll kill anyone who knows. We have to hide. We have to—" She broke off as the headlights grew brighter, closer. 2 sets of them now, moving fast despite the rough terrain. Ethan's mind raced. His truck was parked by the cabin, but there was no way they could reach it without being seen. The cabin itself was no protection, just thin walls and old windows that wouldn't stop anyone determined to get inside. And Lily was in there, alone. That single thought galvanized Ethan like nothing else could. He pulled Clara deeper into the trees, moving as quickly as her weakened state would allow. Behind them, he could hear vehicles pulling to a stop, doors opening, voices calling out. "Search the area," someone commanded. "She couldn't have gotten far." Clara whimpered, and Ethan pressed his hand over her mouth, pulling her down behind a fallen log. He clicked off his flashlight, plunging them into darkness broken only by the moonlight filtering through the branches. His heart hammered so hard he was sure whoever was out there would hear it. The voices grew closer. Flashlight beams swept through the forest like searchlights. Ethan could hear at least 3 distinct speakers, maybe 4. Men, by the sound of their voices. Professional. Organized. "There's the dig site," one of them called out. "Someone's been here, the coffin's broken open." A pause. Then a different voice, cold and controlled. "Find them. Now." Beside him, Clara was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. Ethan held her close, trying to provide warmth and reassurance, while his own mind spun through scenarios. Who were these people? Why had they buried this woman alive? And what would they do when they found out she'd been rescued? A flashlight beam swept directly over their hiding spot, and Ethan held his breath, but it passed on. The searcher moving deeper into the forest, away from the cabin. A small mercy, but Ethan knew it wouldn't last. They would search systematically, and eventually they would find the cabin. They would find Lily. Ethan had to move, had to act. But Clara was in no condition to run, and he couldn't leave her. Couldn't leave Lily either. He was trapped between impossible choices, and time was running out with every passing second. One of the searchers walked right past their hiding spot, so close that Ethan could have reached out and touched his leg. The man wore black tactical gear, and there was a pistol holstered at his hip. These weren't local thugs or opportunistic kidnappers. They were professionals. "Check the residence," the cold voice commanded from somewhere near the vehicles. "Someone lives here. Find them." Ethan's blood turned to ice. He had maybe 30 seconds before they reached the cabin, before they found his daughter. He moved before conscious thought could stop him. Releasing Clara, he picked up a rock the size of his fist and hurled it as hard as he could, away from the cabin, deeper into the forest. It crashed through branches and hit the ground with a satisfying thud. "There!" one of the searchers shouted. "Southeast, maybe 50 yards!" Flashlight beams swung toward the sound. Boots pounded against the forest floor as the men moved in pursuit. Ethan counted 3 of them running toward where the rock had landed, but he'd heard 4 voices, which meant one was still unaccounted for. "Clara," Ethan whispered urgently, "we have to move. Now." She nodded weakly, and Ethan helped her to her feet. They moved as quietly as possible through the undergrowth, Ethan supporting most of Clara's weight. His truck was about 100 yards away, but it might as well have been 100 miles. Every step was an agony of suspense, waiting for the shout that would signal they'd been spotted. They reached the tree line at the edge of Ethan's property. The cabin was lit by the headlights of 2 black SUVs parked in front of it. As Ethan watched, a figure emerged from the porch. The 4th man, no doubt finished searching the interior. "Clear!" the man called out. "No one home, but there's kid stuff inside, toys, school papers." Ethan's hands clenched into fists. They'd been inside, they'd seen Lily's things, and where was Lily? Had she hidden when she'd heard them coming? Had she run into the woods? Or had they... No, he couldn't think that way. Lily was smart. She would have hidden. She had to have hidden. "We need to find whoever dug up the burial site," the cold voice said. Its owner stepped into the light. A man in an expensive suit, incongruous in the forest setting. He was maybe 50, with silver hair and the kind of calm demeanor that came from absolute confidence in his own power. "Spread out. Cover every inch of this property." The searchers fanned out, and Ethan knew they were out of time. In moments, they would spot his truck. They would realize someone was still here, and then, "Daddy?" The small voice cut through the night like a knife through flesh. Ethan's heart stopped. He turned toward the sound and saw Lily emerging from behind the woodpile on the far side of the cabin, her stuffed rabbit clutched in her arms. She'd hidden, like he'd hoped, but now she'd given herself away. One of the searchers spotted her immediately. "There." The man in the suit turned, his eyes fixing on Lily with predatory focus. "Grab her. Use her to draw out whoever freed the woman." Ethan didn't think. He moved, bursting from the tree line with a roar that came from somewhere primal and deep. The searcher closest to Lily turned at the sound, his hand going for his pistol, but Ethan was already there. Years of firefighter training meant Ethan knew how to move fast, how to tackle, how to use his body weight. He slammed into the man like a battering ram, sending them both crashing to the ground. "Lily, run!" Ethan shouted as he grappled with the searcher. "Into the woods! Hide!" But Lily stood frozen, tears streaming down her face, too terrified to move. The other searchers were converging now, and Ethan knew he had seconds at best. He landed a solid punch on his opponent's jaw, stunning the man long enough for Ethan to roll free and scramble toward his daughter. He scooped Lily up in his arms and ran for his truck, fishing his keys from his pocket. Behind him, he could hear shouts, footsteps pounding. Something whizzed past his head. A gunshot, he realized distantly, the sound oddly muffled by his adrenaline. He reached the truck and yanked open the driver's side door, practically throwing Lily inside. "Get down on the floor!" "But Daddy!" "Down!" Lily obeyed, curling into a ball on the floorboards. Ethan turned back toward the forest, where Clara was still hiding. He couldn't leave her. Wouldn't leave her. But as he started back, Clara emerged from the trees on her own, stumbling but determined, moving toward the truck with everything she had left. Another gunshot, this one closer. Ethan grabbed Clara's arm and pulled her toward the passenger side. She fell against the truck, and Ethan helped her climb in, every second feeling like an hour. The searchers were almost on them now, flashlights and weapons raised. The man in the suit stood by the SUVs, calmly speaking into a phone, his eyes never leaving Ethan's truck. Ethan threw himself into the driver's seat, jammed the key into the ignition, and turned it. The engine sputtered. Died. "No," Ethan breathed. Come on, come on." He tried again. The engine turned over but didn't catch. Flashlight beams hit the windshield, blinding him. He could see the shapes of men surrounding the truck, weapons drawn. "Come out," one of them commanded. "Slowly, hands where we can see them." Ethan looked down at Lily, still curled on the floor, her eyes squeezed shut. He looked at Clara, slumped in the passenger seat, barely conscious. He looked at the keys in the ignition. He turned them one more time. The engine roared to life. Ethan slammed the truck into reverse and punched the accelerator. The truck shot backward, forcing the men to scatter. He spun the wheel, executing a J-turn that would have made his old driving instructor proud, and shifted into drive. The tires spun in the soft ground, then caught, and the truck lurched forward. Gunshots rang out. Ethan heard the ping of bullets hitting metal, the crack of his rear window shattering. Glass rained down on Lily, but he didn't dare look down to check if she was hurt. He kept his foot pressed to the floor, guiding the truck down the narrow dirt road by moonlight and instinct more than sight. The headlights of the SUVs flared to life behind him. They were giving chase. The dirt road twisted through the forest, barely wide enough for one vehicle, let alone two. Ethan knew every turn, every rut, every washout. He'd driven this road 1,000 times, but the SUVs behind him had more power, better suspension, and drivers who clearly didn't care about vehicle damage. "Hang on!" Ethan shouted over the roar of the engine. He took a turn too fast and felt the truck's rear end slide out. For one terrible moment, they teetered on the edge of rolling, but Ethan corrected, and they stayed upright. Behind them, one of the SUVs wasn't as lucky, or perhaps their driver wasn't as skilled. Ethan caught a glimpse in his rear-view mirror of the vehicle overcorrecting, sliding off the road, and slamming into a tree. One down, one to go. But the second SUV was right on their tail, close enough that Ethan could see the driver's face in his mirror, cold, focused, determined. The SUV's front bumper kissed the back of Ethan's truck, then hit harder, a pit maneuver meant to send them spinning. Ethan fought the wheel, maintaining control through sheer stubborn will and muscle memory. The main road was close now, maybe another half-mile. If he could just reach it, there would be other cars, witnesses, some hope of escape. Clara grabbed his arm suddenly, her voice stronger than it had been. "Left turn ahead. There's a ranger station about 10 miles down the highway." "I know," Ethan said through gritted teeth. "If we can make it that far." The SUV hit them again, harder this time. Lily screamed. The truck fishtailed, and Ethan lost precious seconds getting it back under control. The SUV pulled up alongside them, trying to force them off the narrow road. Ahead, Ethan could see the intersection with the highway, a blessed strip of asphalt and civilization. But the SUV was level with them now, and Ethan knew what was coming. The driver was going to ram them, send them careening off the road into the trees. In the split second before impact, Ethan made a decision. He slammed on the brakes. The truck's momentum carried them forward even as the wheels locked, but it was enough. The SUV shot past them, the driver caught off guard by the sudden maneuver. Ethan watched as the SUV's driver realized too late that he was going too fast, that the turn onto the highway was too sharp. The SUV hit the intersection without slowing, jumped the small embankment on the far side, and disappeared into the darkness beyond. Ethan heard the crash, metal tearing, glass shattering, but he didn't stop to look. He accelerated through the turn onto the highway, finally allowing himself a full breath. They'd made it. They were alive. For now. "Is everyone okay?" Ethan asked, his voice shaking with adrenaline crash. "Lily, you hurt?" Lily slowly uncurled from her position on the floor. Her face was pale and streaked with tears, but she shook her head. "I'm okay, Daddy. I was really scared, but I'm okay." Ethan reached down with one hand and squeezed her shoulder, needing the physical contact to assure himself she was really there, really safe. Then he glanced at Clara, who sat slumped against the door, her eyes closed. Clara? Hey, stay with me. We're going to get help. Clara's eyes opened slowly. They'll keep coming, she whispered. They won't stop. Not until I'm dead and everyone who helped me is dead too. Who are they? Ethan demanded, his hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. Who the hell buries someone alive in the middle of the woods? But Clara's eyes had closed again, and Ethan wasn't sure if she'd passed out or simply had nothing left to give. The ranger station materialized out of the darkness ahead, its lights like a beacon of safety and sanity. Ethan pulled into the parking lot, laying on the horn as soon as the truck came to a stop. Rangers emerged from the building, hands on weapons, clearly alarmed by the shattered windows and bullet holes in Ethan's truck. "We need help," Ethan shouted through his window. "Someone's been hurt, and men with guns are chasing us." The Rangers moved into action with practiced efficiency. One of them pulled open the passenger door and began assessing Clara. Another opened the back door and gently helped Lily out, wrapping her in a blanket that seemed to appear from nowhere. A third ranger, an older man with sergeant's stripes on his uniform, approached Ethan's window. "Sir, I need you to step out of the vehicle slowly and keep your hands visible." Ethan complied, his muscles trembling with exhaustion and shock. As soon as he was out, the sergeant guided him away from the truck, no doubt assessing him for weapons or threat level. "My name is Ethan Cole," Ethan said, his words tumbling out in a rush. "I live about 15 miles up Road 47. I was gathering firewood, and I heard someone knocking under the ground. I dug them up, her, Clara. She was buried in a coffin. Then men with guns, and they chased us and—" "Slow down, Mr. Cole," the sergeant said, his voice calm but firm. "You're saying you found someone buried alive?" "Yes. I know how it sounds, but you have to believe me. There's a burial site in the woods behind my cabin. You can go see for yourself. And those men, they were going to kill us. They were going to—" "Dad!" Lily's voice cut through his panic. She'd broken away from the ranger tending to her and thrown herself at Ethan, wrapping her arms around his waist. "Don't let them take you away. Please don't let them take you." Ethan dropped to his knees and pulled his daughter close, burying his face in her hair. She smelled like their cabin, wood smoke and pine, and the strawberry shampoo she insisted on using even though they could barely afford it. She was safe. They were both safe, for the moment. The ranger tending to Clara called out, "Sergeant, you need to see this." The sergeant moved to the truck, and Ethan watched as the ranger showed him Clara's hands, the broken nails, the blood, the deep scratches on her fingers. Physical evidence that supported Ethan's impossible story. "Get EMS here now," the sergeant ordered, "and I want state police notified. We have a potential kidnapping and attempted murder." He turned back to Ethan. "Mr. Cole, I'm going to need you to tell me everything from the beginning. Can you do that?" Ethan nodded, still holding Lily. Yeah, I can do that." But as he began to speak, as the words tumbled out and the story took shape, Ethan saw Clara's eyes open in the truck. She was looking directly at him, and in her gaze he saw something that made his blood run cold again. This wasn't over. Whatever had led to her burial, whoever those men worked for, whatever dark machinery she'd stumbled into, it was all still out there. And by saving her, Ethan had stepped into the middle of something that would either destroy them all or demand every ounce of courage and strength he possessed. The mountains didn't forgive mistakes. And tonight, Ethan had made himself part of a story that was far bigger and more dangerous than he could possibly imagine. But as he held his daughter close and watched the EMTs carefully load Clara onto a stretcher, Ethan knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever came next, he wouldn't face it by running or hiding. He'd spent the last year and a half hiding from his past, from his trauma, from the man he used to be. Tonight, the man he used to be had come back, the one who ran toward danger, the one who saved people. And whoever had put Clara in that coffin was about to learn that some men, when pushed far enough, when fighting for people they loved, were more dangerous than any organization or conspiracy. The mountains didn't forgive mistakes, and burying someone alive in Ethan Cole's backyard had been a very big mistake. The ranger station's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry insects, casting everything in a harsh clinical glow that made Ethan's eyes ache. He sat in a small interview room, a styrofoam cup of terrible coffee cooling in his hands, while Lily dozed fitfully in a chair beside him, wrapped in 2 wool blankets that smelled faintly of mothballs. Through the window in the door, he could see rangers moving back and forth, their voices low and urgent as they coordinated with state police and emergency services. It had been 3 hours since they'd arrived. 3 hours of questions and statements and skeptical looks from officers who clearly thought Ethan might be suffering from some kind of break with reality. 3 hours of watching Clara being loaded into an ambulance, her face obscured by an oxygen mask, her eyes finding his one last time before the doors closed. 3 hours of sitting with the knowledge that somewhere out there, dangerous men were regrouping, planning their next move. Sergeant Marcus Webb sat across from Ethan now, a yellow legal pad covered in notes between them. Webb was maybe 60, with the weathered face of a man who'd spent his life in the mountains and the careful eyes of someone who'd learned not to take anything at face value. He'd been patient with Ethan, letting him tell the story his own way, asking clarifying questions but never pushing too hard. Now he leaned back in his chair and studied Ethan with an expression that was impossible to read. "Mr. Cole," Webb said finally, "I've been a ranger for 32 years. I've seen a lot of strange things in these mountains, but I've got to tell you, your story ranks right up there with the strangest." Ethan felt his stomach tighten. "You don't believe me." "I didn't say that." Webb tapped his pen against the legal pad. "The woman you brought in, Ms. Wexler, she's in rough shape, but the doctors confirm she's suffering from oxygen deprivation consistent with prolonged confinement in a small space. Her injuries, the broken nails, the defensive wounds on her hands, they support your account. And your truck has 7 bullet holes in it, which means someone was definitely shooting at you. So you do believe me." Webb's expression softened slightly. "I believe something happened tonight, something serious. But here's where I'm struggling, Mr. Cole. You're telling me that professional gunmen buried a woman alive in the forest, then came back to check on her burial site with multiple vehicles and personnel. That's a lot of resources for what amounts to a murder. Why not just shoot her and dump the body somewhere it would never be found? Why the elaborate burial?" Ethan had been asking himself the same question for the past 3 hours. "I don't know. Maybe they wanted it to look like she disappeared, or maybe they're sick bastards who get off on that kind of thing. Maybe." Webb didn't sound convinced. "Or maybe there's something about Ms. Wexler, who she is, what she knows, that makes this whole situation a lot more complicated than a simple murder plot. She said her name was Clara Wexler. Do you know who that is?" Webb nodded slowly. "State police ran her identification. Clara Wexler is the CEO of Wexler Technologies, a cybersecurity firm based out of Seattle. She's worth somewhere north of $300 million. And according to the Seattle PD, she was reported missing 2 days ago when she didn't show up for a board meeting." The number hit Ethan like a physical blow. $300 million. He'd saved someone worth $300 million. The scale of it was incomprehensible, so far outside his experience that his mind struggled to process it. People that rich lived in different worlds, played by different rules, had different kinds of enemies. "So this was about money?" Ethan asked. "Probably. Could be a kidnapping for ransom that went wrong. Could be corporate espionage or a hostile takeover attempt. Could be personal, a vengeful ex, a business partner with a grudge." Webb shrugged. "Could be a lot of things. That's for the detectives to figure out. My concern right now is keeping you and your daughter safe." "Safe?" The word came out sharper than Ethan intended. "We're not safe. Those men saw Lily. They know where I live. Mr. Cole." Webb's voice was firm but not unkind. "I understand you're frightened. You have every right to be, but those men aren't coming back tonight. We've got units sweeping your property right now, documenting the burial site and searching for evidence. We've also got officers stationed at the hospital where Ms. Wexler is being treated. And I've arranged for you and your daughter to stay at a secure location until we can assess the full scope of the threat." Ethan looked down at Lily, who stirred in her sleep but didn't wake. Her face was so peaceful, so innocent. He'd brought her to the mountains to keep her safe, to get away from the chaos of the city and the complications of his failed marriage. Instead, he dragged her into something exponentially more dangerous. "What kind of secure location?" he asked quietly. There's a motel about 40 miles from here. It's not fancy, but it's clean and the owner is discreet. I've used it before for witness protection situations. You'll stay there for a few days while we investigate, and we'll have a deputy checking on you regularly. And then what? We go back to the cabin like nothing happened? Pretend that men with guns didn't try to kill us? Webb was quiet for a moment. I'm not going to lie to you, Mr. Cole. If these people are as professional as they seem, they might not give up easily. But the state police are involved now. The FBI will probably get involved given the kidnapping and interstate implications, and Ms. Wexler herself will have resources, security, private investigators, lawyers. You're not alone in this. But Ethan felt alone. Profoundly, terrifyingly alone in a way he hadn't felt since the worst days after his last fire, when he'd wake up screaming and find Sarah's side of the bed empty. He'd saved Clara Wexler's life, and in doing so, he'd painted a target on his back and Lily's. The unfairness of it burned in his chest like acid. "Can I see her?" Ethan asked. "Miss Wexler, can I talk to her?" Webb shook his head. "Not tonight. She's sedated and the doctors want to run more tests, but I imagine she'll want to talk to you too once she's able. You saved her life, after all." The door to the interview room opened and a younger ranger stuck his head in. "Sergeant, Detective Marsh is here from State Police. He wants to debrief the witness." Webb stood, gathering his legal pad. "Mr. Cole, I'm going to step out for a few minutes. Detective Marsh will probably have more questions, but then we'll get you and your daughter to that motel. Try to get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." After Webb left, Ethan sat alone with his sleeping daughter and his racing thoughts. The coffee had gone stone cold, but he sipped it anyway, needing something to do with his hands. Through the window, he could see Webb talking to a man in a suit, Detective Marsh, presumably, and the way they both kept glancing back at the interview room made Ethan's skin crawl. He was a witness now, a participant in something that would require statements and testimony and probably lawyers. His life, which had already been hanging by a thread, was about to get infinitely more complicated. Social services would probably get involved, questioning his fitness as a parent given what Lily had been exposed to. Sarah would hear about this, how could she not? And she'd use it as ammunition in her ongoing campaign to get full custody. Ethan closed his eyes and tried to breathe through the rising panic. One thing at a time. That's what his old fire captain used to say. When everything's burning and chaos is everywhere, you handle one thing at a time. Get the people out. Control the perimeter. Attack the fire. One thing at a time. Right now, the one thing was keeping Lily safe. Everything else could wait. Detective Marsh turned out to be a compact man in his 40s with the kind of intensity that came from years of working violent crimes. He entered the interview room with a thick folder under one arm and a digital recorder in his hand, his movements efficient and purposeful. He introduced himself, set up the recorder, and dove straight into questions without any of Webb's gentle preamble. For the next hour, Ethan walked through the entire sequence of events again, this time with Marsh stopping him frequently to probe for details. What exactly had the knocking sounded like? How deep had he dug before hitting the coffin? Could he describe the men who'd chased him? What kind of weapons had they carried? What had Clara said exactly in those first moments after he pulled her free? Ethan answered as best he could, but the night had taken on a dreamlike quality in his memory, events blurring together. He remembered terror and adrenaline and the sound of Lily screaming, but the specifics felt slippery, like trying to hold water in his cupped hands. "Mr. Cole," Marsh said, leaning forward, "I want you to think carefully about this next question. Did Ms. Wexler say anything? Anything at all? About why she was buried? Who did it? What they wanted?" Ethan tried to remember. Claire's voice had been so weak, her words coming in gasps between desperate pulls of air. "She said they tried to kill me. And when we heard the vehicles coming, she said they're coming back to check if I'm dead. That's all I remember." "They," Marsh repeated. Plural. So she knew there were multiple people involved. "I guess so. I don't know. I was trying to keep her alive and get my daughter to safety. I wasn't conducting an interrogation." Marsh's expression didn't change. "Of course. I understand. But every detail matters here, Mr. Cole. We're dealing with what appears to be a highly organized criminal operation. These aren't amateurs who panicked and made stupid mistakes. Everything about this, the location, The method, the response when they realized she'd been freed, suggests careful planning and significant resources. What does that mean for me and my daughter? It means you need to be careful. These people have already demonstrated they're willing to kill. They've seen your face, they know where you live. Even with police protection, you're vulnerable. The words hit Ethan like punches. So what am I supposed to do? Live in hiding? Uproot my daughter's life? I'm barely keeping things together as it is. Marsh's expression softened slightly, the first real emotion he'd shown. I have kids too, Mr. Cole. 2 daughters. I understand what you're feeling, but I've also seen what happens when witnesses don't take threats seriously. The motel Sergeant Webb mentioned is a good first step, but you need to start thinking long term. Maybe stay with family for a while, friends in another state? Ethan almost laughed. Family? His parents were dead. Sarah's family had never liked him. And friends? The few he'd had from his firefighting days had drifted away after his diagnosis, uncomfortable with his struggles and unable to understand what he was going through. He was as isolated as a man could be. I'll figure something out, Ethan said, though he had no idea what that something might be. Marsh clicked off the recorder and stood. Get some rest tonight, Mr. Cole. Tomorrow, I'll need you to come down to the scene. Show us exactly where you found Ms. Wexler. Walk us through everything that happened. Can you do that? Ethan nodded, though the thought of returning to those woods made his stomach churn. He didn't want to see that hole in the ground again, that coffin with its shattered viewing window. Didn't want to relive those minutes of frantic digging, of not knowing if the person inside was already dead. But he would do it. For Clara, who'd endured unspeakable terror. For Lily, who needed her father to be strong. For himself, because facing fear was better than running from it. A lesson he'd learned in flames and was relearning now in darkness. After Marsh left, Webb returned with better news. The motel was ready, a deputy would escort them there, and in the morning, after some sleep, they'd deal with the next steps. Ethan gently shook Lily awake, and she blinked up at him with confusion that quickly shifted to remembered fear. Are we going home? She asked in a small voice. Not yet, baby. We're going to stay somewhere else tonight, somewhere safe. Because of the bad men? Ethan wanted to lie, to tell her it was all over and everything would be fine. But Lily had seen too much to believe comforting falsehoods. She deserved honesty, even if it scared her. Yeah, he said, because of the bad men. But the police are going to protect us, and I'm going to protect you, always. You believe that, right? Lily nodded and held up her stuffed rabbit. Mr. Hoppy believes it too. The motel was exactly as Webb had described. Not fancy, but clean, tucked away on a side road that barely showed up on maps. The deputy who'd escorted them, a young woman named Officer Chen, checked the room thoroughly before letting them enter, then positioned herself in a chair outside with a clear view of both the door and the parking lot. Ethan got Lily settled in one of the 2 double beds, tucking the scratchy motel blankets around her with the same care he'd used when she was a toddler. She fell asleep almost immediately, exhaustion finally overcoming fear. Ethan envied her that ability to simply shut down, to let unconsciousness provide temporary escape. He sat on the other bed and stared at the television without turning it on, his mind replaying the night's events in an endless loop. The knocking, the coffin, Clara's terrified eyes, the gunshots, Lily's scream. It was all there, burned into his memory with the same permanence as the burns that had ended his firefighting career. His phone buzzed, the first time it had made any sound all night. Ethan had forgotten he even had it until now. He pulled it from his pocket and saw a text from an unknown number. Mr. Cole, this is Detective Marsh. Ms. Wexler is awake and asking for you. If you're willing, I can arrange for you to speak with her tomorrow at the hospital. She says it's important. Let me know. Ethan stared at the message for a long moment. What could Clara possibly want to tell him that was so important it couldn't wait? What did she know that Marsh and the other investigators didn't? And more pressingly, did Ethan really want to get more involved in this than he already was? But even as he asked himself the question, he knew the answer. He'd heard Clara knocking beneath the earth. He'd broken open her coffin and pulled her from darkness into light. That created a connection, a bond forged in crisis that couldn't be easily dismissed. She'd looked at him in those first moments with an expression that transcended simple gratitude. It was recognition, soul deep, of someone who'd been pulled back from the absolute edge of existence. He typed back, "I'll be there." "What time?" The response came almost immediately. 10 a.m., St. Mary's Hospital in Redmond. Ask for me at the front desk. And Mr. Cole? Come alone. No daughter. This conversation isn't for children. Ethan felt a chill run through him. What could Clara possibly need to tell him that Lily couldn't hear? He looked over at his daughter, sleeping peacefully for the first time in hours, and made a decision. Whatever Clara Wexler had to say, he needed to hear it, not just for his own safety, but for Lily's, because the men who'd buried Clara alive weren't going to simply disappear. They would regroup, reassess, and come back. And when they did, Ethan needed to be prepared. He set his phone aside and lay back on the bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling. Sleep felt impossible, his body still flooded with adrenaline and his mind racing with possibilities, each more frightening than the last. But eventually, somehow, exhaustion won out over fear, and Ethan drifted into a fitful sleep filled with dreams of knocking sounds and hands pressed against foggy glass. He woke to weak sunlight filtering through the motel's thin curtains and the smell of cheap coffee from the pot in the bathroom. Lily was already awake, sitting cross-legged on her bed and watching cartoons on the ancient television with the volume turned low. When she saw Ethan stirring, she smiled, a tentative thing, fragile as spun glass. "Morning, Daddy." "Morning, sweetheart. How'd you sleep?" "Okay. I had dreams about the lady you saved. Is she going to be all right?" Ethan sat up, running a hand through his hair. "I think so. In fact, I need to go see her today at the hospital." "What?" "Officer Chen is going to stay with you here while I'm gone. Is that okay?" Lily's smile faltered. "You're leaving me?" "Just for a few hours. I'll be back before lunch. I promise." "That's what you said last night before you went to get firewood." The words were a knife between his ribs. Ethan moved to Lily's bed and pulled her close. "You're right. Last night I said I'd be back quick, and then everything went crazy. But this is different. The hospital is safe, the police are involved, and Officer Chen is going to be right outside the door. Nothing's going to happen. Can I come with you?" "Not this time. The hospital is for adults right now, but I tell you what, when I get back, we'll go get pancakes. The biggest, most ridiculous stack of pancakes you've ever seen, with chocolate chips and whipped cream and all that stuff that makes dentists cry. Deal?" Lily considered this, then nodded. "Deal. But you have to promise to come back." "Cross my heart," Ethan said, making the gesture. "Wild horses couldn't keep me away." After getting Lily settled with breakfast from the Motel Continental spread, which was generous in name only, Ethan spoke with Officer Chen about the plan. She was professional and reassuring, promising to keep Lily entertained and safe. Ethan left them playing cards at the small table by the window and drove toward Redmond, his truck's shattered rear window covered with plastic sheeting that whistled and snapped in the wind. St. Mary's Hospital was a sprawling complex of glass and steel that looked wildly out of place against the mountain backdrop. Ethan parked in the visitor lot and made his way to the front desk, where a tired-looking receptionist directed him to the 4th floor, intensive care unit. Detective Marsh was waiting by the elevators, holding 2 cups of coffee that smelled infinitely better than the motel's offering. "Mr. Cole," Marsh said, handing him one of the cups. "Thanks for coming. Ms. Wexler has been asking for you since she regained full consciousness around 6 this morning." "How is she?" "Physically, better than expected, considering mild hypoxia, dehydration, some contusions and lacerations. Nothing that won't heal. Psychologically?" Marsh shook his head. "That's going to take time. What she went through, being buried alive, it's the kind of trauma that leaves permanent scars." They rode the elevator in silence, the only sound the mechanical whir of the cable system. When they reached the 4th floor, Marsh led Ethan through a maze of corridors to a private room at the end of the hall. 2 state police officers stood outside, their presence a reminder that Clara Wexler was still in danger. "I should warn you," Marsh said quietly before opening the door. "Ms. Wexler has been somewhat evasive about certain details of her kidnapping. She's told us the basics, grabbed outside her office building 2 nights ago, held somewhere she couldn't identify, then transported to the burial site. But when we ask about who did this or why, she becomes vague, claims she doesn't know." "You don't believe her?" Marcia's expression was carefully neutral. I think she's terrified, and I think she might have reasons for not wanting to share everything she knows. So when you talk to her, if she tells you anything at all, that seems relevant, I need you to share it with me. Can you do that? Ethan nodded, though he wasn't entirely sure what he was agreeing to. Marcia opened the door and gestured for Ethan to enter alone. The room was filled with the soft beeping of monitors and the antiseptic smell common to all hospitals. Clara Wexler sat propped up in the bed, an IV line running into her arm and an oxygen cannula under her nose. In the harsh light of morning, with the dirt washed away and her hair pulled back, she looked both younger and older than she had last night. Younger in her features, which were delicate and refined, but older in her eyes, which carried the weight of what she'd endured. She turned toward the door as Ethan entered, and her face transformed. Relief, gratitude, and something else, something almost like hope, flashed across her features. "Mr. Cole," she said, her voice still hoarse but stronger than it had been. "They told me you'd come. I wasn't sure you would." "You can call me Ethan." He moved closer to the bed, unsure of the proper protocol for this situation. "Do you shake hands with someone you pulled from a coffin?" "How are you feeling?" "Like I died and came back," Clara said with a ghost of a smile. "Which, I suppose, is accurate. The doctors say I was maybe 20 minutes away from complete oxygen deprivation when you found me. 20 minutes from brain damage or death." Ethan sat in the chair beside her bed, the same kind of uncomfortable plastic chair that seemed to be standard issue in every medical facility. "I'm glad I went out for firewood when I did, then." "It wasn't luck," Clara said, her eyes intense despite her obvious exhaustion. "Or coincidence. They left me there to die. But they also left me a flashlight and just enough air to last through the night. They wanted me to know I was dying, wanted me to have hours to think about it, to panic, to suffer. That kind of cruelty. It's not random. It's personal." "Who did this to you?" Clara looked away toward the window where morning light painted everything in shades of gold. "That's complicated. Detective Marsh says you haven't told them much." "Detective Marsh is a good man doing his job, but there are things happening here that go beyond his jurisdiction, beyond what the police can help with." She turned back to Ethan. "How much do you know about my company? About what we do?" "Just what Sergeant Webb told me. Cybersecurity. You're the CEO. You're worth a lot of money." Clara made a sound that might have been a laugh if it hadn't been so bitter. "Worth a lot of money. Yes, 300 million, give or take. You know what that kind of wealth attracts? Sharks, predators, people who see you not as a person, but as an asset to be acquired or eliminated." "So this was about money? A hostile takeover?" "It's about what I know." Clara's hands clenched the hospital blanket. Wexler Technologies doesn't just do commercial cybersecurity. We also contract with government agencies, NSA, CIA, Defense Department. And 6 months ago, we were hired to audit the security systems of a company called Meridian Holdings. Have you heard of them? Ethan shook his head. "Most people haven't. They're a private military contractor, but they also do intelligence work, black ops stuff that official agencies can't touch. During our audit, I found something." She paused, and Ethan could see her weighing how much to reveal. "Evidence of illegal activities, arms deals with sanctioned countries, money laundering, possibly worse. I reported it to my contact at the Defense Department, thinking I was doing the right thing, fulfilling my patriotic duty." "Let me guess," Ethan said, pieces clicking together in his mind. "Someone at Defense was in on it. Or someone at Meridian has enough influence to reach into Defense. I don't know which. But 2 weeks after I filed my report, I started noticing things. Cars following me. Strangers watching my house. My phone's being tapped. I could tell. I'm an expert in this stuff. I hired private security, went to the FBI, did everything by the book. And 2 nights ago, 3 men grabbed me in my office parking garage. Professional, efficient, like they'd done it 100 times before. They drugged me, and when I woke up, I was in that coffin." Her voice cracked slightly. "They told me I'd brought this on myself, that I should have minded my own business. Then they closed the lid and buried me." Ethan felt sick. The casual cruelty of it, the calculated torture. It was beyond anything he'd experienced, even in his worst fires. "Why didn't they just kill you outright?" "Because they needed to send a message," Clara said. To my company, to anyone else who might think about reporting what they find. And also because they're sadists who enjoy the power. The man who ordered it, I only saw him once when they first grabbed me. He told me I'd have plenty of time to regret my choices, that I'd die knowing I'd brought it on myself. What did he look like? Clara closed her eyes, and Ethan could see her fighting back tears. 50-something, silver hair, expensive suit. He had this presence, like someone used to absolute authority. And his eyes, they were empty, like looking into a void. The description matched the man Ethan had seen at his cabin, the one who'd ordered his men to grab Lily. His stomach clenched. He was there last night, at my property. He's the one who sent men after us. Claire's eyes snapped open. He saw you. He saw me and my daughter. We're in protective custody now, but Clara... Ethan leaned forward, needing her to understand the gravity of this. I'm a single father barely keeping my head above water. I don't have your resources or your security. If these people come after me and Lily, they will come after you, Clara interrupted, her voice urgent. That's why I needed to see you, to warn you. These people don't leave loose ends, Ethan. You saved my life, which makes you a liability to them. They'll want to silence you to make sure you can't testify or identify anyone. The words confirmed Ethan's worst fears, but hearing them spoken aloud made them real in a way they hadn't been before. He thought of Lily at the motel, playing cards with Officer Chen, trusting that her father would protect her. How could he protect her from an organization with the resources to bury a CEO alive? What do I do? He asked, hearing the desperation in his own voice. Clara reached out and took his hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. You fight back. With me. I have resources they don't know about. Money in offshore accounts, contacts who owe me favors, information I've kept as insurance. But I can't do this alone. I need someone I can trust absolutely. Someone who's proven they'll do the right thing even when it's dangerous. You want me to help you take down a private military contractor? I'm not a spy or a soldier, Clara. I'm just a guy who used to fight fires. You're a guy who heard someone knocking underground and dug them up instead of walking away. You're a guy who fought off armed men to protect a stranger and his daughter. You're exactly who I need. Clara's eyes blazed with an intensity that was almost frightening. I can protect you and Lily. I can give you resources, new identities if necessary, security better than anything the police can provide. But I need your help. I need your testimony about what happened, about the men you saw. And I need someone who gives a damn about doing the right thing in a world where that's increasingly rare. Ethan looked down at their joined hands, his scarred and calloused from labor and fire, hers marked with bandages covering the wounds from her desperate struggle against the coffin lid. Two people who'd been broken by different kinds of flames, now bound together by chance and choice. My daughter, he said slowly. Whatever I do, whatever I agree to, her safety comes first, non-negotiable. I understand. I'd want the same if I had children. And I need to know everything, no secrets, no holding back. If we're doing this, if I'm putting Lily at risk for this, I need to know exactly what we're up against. Clara nodded. I'll tell you everything, every detail of what I found, who I think is involved, what resources I have to fight them. But not here, not now. The hospital isn't secure, and Detective Marsh, good as his intentions are, is part of a system that's already been compromised. We need to be smart about this. So what's the plan? First, you go back to your daughter. Spend the day with her somewhere safe. Tomorrow, I'm checking myself out of this hospital against medical advice. I have a safe house in the San Juan Islands, remote, secure, off the grid. I want you and Lily to meet me there. We'll have time to plan, to gather evidence, to figure out our next move. The police won't like me leaving their protection. The police can't protect you from Meridian Holdings. Trust me on this. Clara squeezed his hand one more time, then released it. I know I'm asking a lot. I know you have every reason to walk away from this and try to disappear. But Ethan, they've already seen your face. They already know where you live. His mind spinning with the magnitude of what was being asked of him, part of him. The part that had spent the last 18 months just trying to survive, to be a good enough father that the courts wouldn't take Lily away, wanted to refuse. Wanted to grab his daughter and run as far and as fast as possible. But another part, The part that had run into burning buildings when everyone else ran out, knew Clara was right. The men who'd buried her weren't going to let him live as a witness to their crime. His only choice was between dying afraid or fighting back. "The San Juan Islands," he said. "How do I find this safe house?" Clara smiled, and for the first time since he'd pulled her from the ground, it reached her eyes. "I'll send you the details tonight. Encrypted message. And Ethan? Thank you. For everything. For digging when you heard knocking. For not looking away. For being exactly the kind of person the world needs more of." Ethan left the hospital with more questions than answers, and a weight on his shoulders that felt like it might crush him. Detective Marsh was waiting in the hallway, his expression expectant. "Well," Marsh asked, "did she tell you anything useful?" Ethan thought about Clara's request for discretion, about her warning that the system had been compromised. He thought about Lily, waiting for him at the motel, trusting him to keep her safe. And he made a choice that went against every instinct toward honesty and cooperation he'd been raised with. "She thanked me for saving her," Ethan said carefully. "She's still pretty shaken up. Couldn't tell me much about who grabbed her or why, just that she wants to feel safe again." It wasn't exactly a lie, but it wasn't the truth either. Marsh studied him for a long moment, and Ethan had the uncomfortable feeling that the detective saw right through him. But finally, Marsh just nodded. "All right. Well, if she remembers anything else, or if you think of any additional details, you call me immediately. Understood?" "Understood." Ethan made it to the elevator before the guilt hit him. He was lying to the police, withholding information in what was probably a federal investigation. 6 months ago, hell, 6 days ago, he never would have considered such a thing. But 6 days ago, he hadn't pulled a woman from a coffin or been shot at by professional killers or learned that corruption ran deep enough to compromise law enforcement itself. The world had revealed itself to be far more complicated and dangerous than he'd believed, and survival in that world required adaptation. He drove back to the motel with his mind churning through logistics. The San Juan Islands were a full day's drive from here, maybe more with Lily needing breaks. He'd need to gather supplies from the cabin, clothes, important documents, what little money he had saved. He'd need to tell Officer Chen something convincing, get away from protective custody without raising alarms. And he'd need to explain to Lily that their lives were changing again, that the stability he'd tried so hard to provide was being ripped away by forces beyond his control. When he pulled into the motel parking lot, he saw Officer Chen standing outside the room, her posture alert, her hand near her weapon. Ethan's heart lurched. "What's wrong?" he asked, practically running from the truck. "Where's Lily?" "She's fine," Chen said quickly. "Inside, watching TV. But Mr. Cole, we had a situation about an hour ago. A man came by asking questions about the occupants of this room, claimed to be with the utility company, checking meters. But there are no meters on this side of the building." Ethan felt ice spread through his veins. What did he look like? Mid-30s, athletic build, wearing workman's clothes, but his boots were too clean, too expensive, and he had an earpiece, the kind security personnel use. Chen's expression was grim. "I ran him off, told him this was an active police investigation, and he needed to leave. He complied without argument, but Mr. Cole, they know you're here." "How? We were careful, They're professionals," Chen said flatly. "They probably have contacts everywhere. Police scanners, hospital staff, informants. It doesn't matter how. What matters is this location is compromised." Ethan's mind raced. Clara's warning echoed in his head. The police can't protect you from Meridian Holdings. He needed to move, needed to get Lily somewhere truly safe, but he also needed to be smart about it, not panic and make mistakes that could get them killed. "Officer Chen," he said carefully, "I appreciate everything you've done, but I think Lily and I need to disappear for a while, truly disappear. Can you give us a head start?" Chen looked at him for a long moment, and Ethan could see her weighing her duty against her judgment. Finally, she said, "How long?" 24 hours. Don't report that we're gone for 24 hours. "I could lose my job, could face charges for obstruction." "I know, but these people, they tried to kill me and my daughter last night. They found us here despite police protection. The system isn't working, and I need to do what the system can't. Keep my little girl alive. Chen's jaw tightened, but she nodded. 24 hours. But Mr. Cole, whatever you're planning, be smart about it. These people play for keeps. So do I, Ethan said, though he wasn't sure he believed it. He went inside and found Lily exactly where Chen had said, curled up on the bed with Mr. Hoppy, watching cartoons but not really seeing them. When she saw him, she jumped up and threw herself into his arms. You came back. You promised, and you did. Of course I did, baby. Now listen, we need to pack up and go on a little adventure. Remember those pancakes I promised? Well, we're going to get them in a really cool place. An island. Have you ever been to an island? Lily shook her head, her eyes wide. Well, there's a first time for everything. So let's get moving. We've got a long drive ahead of us. As they packed their few belongings and prepared to leave, Ethan caught his reflection in the motel mirror. The man staring back at him looked different somehow, harder, more determined. The broken firefighter who'd been barely holding things together was gone, replaced by someone who'd remembered what it meant to fight. The mountains didn't forgive mistakes, but they also taught strength to those who survived them. Ethan had survived fires that killed others, survived the death of his marriage, survived the slow erosion of everything he'd once been. Now he would survive this. For Lily, for Clara, for the simple essential reason that sometimes the world demanded you choose between cowering in fear and standing up to fight, and Ethan Cole had never been very good at cowering. They walked out of the motel into bright afternoon sunshine, and Ethan didn't look back. The highway stretched before them like a ribbon of possibility and danger intertwined, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the asphalt as Ethan pushed the truck north toward the coast. Lily sat in the passenger seat with her seatbelt pulled tight across her chest. Mr. Hoppy clutched in her lap, watching the landscape roll by with the kind of quiet intensity that told Ethan she understood more than she was saying. They'd been driving for 3 hours, stopping only once for gas at a station where Ethan had paid cash and kept his face angled away from the security cameras. Paranoia, maybe, but Clara's warnings had burrowed deep into his consciousness. Every car that stayed behind them too long made his pulse quicken. Every rest stop they passed felt like a potential ambush point. The world had become a minefield, and Ethan was navigating it with nothing but instinct and fear. Daddy? Lily's voice was small in the truck's cabin. Are we running away? Ethan's hands tightened on the steering wheel. He'd been dreading this question, knowing it would come but unprepared for the ache it caused in his chest. How did you explain to a 7-year-old that the world contained people evil enough to bury someone alive? That her father had stumbled into something that threatened to swallow them both? We're going somewhere safe, he said carefully. Somewhere those bad men from last night can't find us. But what about our house? What about my school and my friends? I know, sweetheart. I know it's not fair. But sometimes we have to make hard choices to stay safe. Ethan glanced over at her, seeing the confusion and fear warring in her expression. Remember when we had that really bad storm last winter and a tree fell on the Johnsons' house? Lily nodded. And remember how they had to go live with Mrs. Johnson's sister for a few months while their house got fixed? They didn't want to leave, but they had to because staying wasn't safe. That's kind of what we're doing now. Is our house broken? In a way, yeah. But we're going to fix it, I promise. It was a promise Ethan had no idea how to keep, but he made it anyway because that's what fathers did. They promised safety and security even when the world offered neither. They built walls of certainty around their children's fears, even as their own doubts threatened to collapse those walls from within. Lily was quiet for a while, processing this explanation with the seriousness of a much older child. Finally, she said, "The lady you saved, Ms. Clara, is she the reason we have to leave?" It's complicated, baby. That's what grown-ups say when they don't want to explain things. Ethan couldn't help but smile despite everything. You're too smart for your own good, you know that? Okay, here's the truth, as simple as I can make it. Ms. Clara found out about some very bad people doing very bad things. Those bad people wanted to stop her from telling anyone, so they hurt her. I saved her, which means those bad people are mad at me too. Now Ms. Clara and I are going to work together to make sure those bad people can't hurt anyone else. And while we're doing that, we need to stay somewhere they can't find us. Like superheroes? The comparison was so unexpected that Ethan laughed, A real laugh, the first he'd managed in days. Yeah, I guess kind of like superheroes, except we don't have any powers and we're both pretty scared. Superheroes get scared too, Lily said with the absolute certainty of childhood. That's what makes them brave. Mrs. Patterson told us that in class. She said being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means being scared and doing the right thing anyway. Ethan felt his throat tighten with emotion. Mrs. Patterson, Lily's second-grade teacher, was a saint. She'd been understanding about Ethan's situation, had sent extra supplies home when she noticed Lily's clothes getting too small, had never once made either of them feel like charity cases. And now Lily was pulling wisdom from those lessons, applying them to a situation no 7-year-old should have to face. Mrs. Patterson is right, Ethan said. And you know what? You're one of the bravest people I know. The way you hid last night when those men came, the way you're handling all of this, I'm so proud of you, Lily. Your mom would be too. Lily's expression clouded at the mention of Sarah. Do you think Mom knows what's happening? Do you think she's worried about me? The question was a knife between Ethan's ribs. Sarah had left 14 months ago and had seen Lily exactly 3 times since then, brief, awkward visits in coffee shops where Sarah had spent more time on her phone than engaging with her daughter. The last visit had been 4 months ago, and Sarah hadn't called since. Ethan had no idea if she would care about what they were going through, or if her new life in Seattle had fully eclipsed the old one. I'm sure she cares, Ethan said, though the words tasted like ash. Your mom has a lot going on right now, but that doesn't mean she doesn't love you. It's okay if she doesn't, Lily said quietly. I have you, that's enough. Ethan had to blink away tears. The casual way Lily accepted abandonment, the matter-of-fact resignation in her voice. It broke something in him. She was too young to be this emotionally self-sufficient, too young to have already learned that parents could fail you, that love could be conditional and revocable. You'll always have me, Ethan said fiercely. No matter what happens, no matter how bad things get, you will always have me. That's not a maybe. That's forever. Okay? Okay, Daddy. They drove in silence after that, the weight of the conversation settling over them like a blanket. Ethan's mind drifted to Clara's promise of a safe house, of resources and protection. He'd received the encrypted message just before leaving the motel, coordinates for a property on Lopez Island, along with detailed instructions for reaching it without being followed. The paranoia inherent in those instructions had been both reassuring and terrifying. As they crossed the state line into Washington, Ethan pulled off at a rest stop to let Lily use the bathroom and to check his phone. There was a new message from an unknown number. Mr. Cole, this is Detective Marsh. We need to talk urgently. Officer Chen reported that you left protective custody. This is extremely dangerous. Please contact me immediately. Ethan stared at the message, his thumb hovering over the call button. Part of him wanted to reach out, to bring Marsh into the loop, to have the weight of official investigation backing them up. But Clara's words echoed in his mind. The system has been compromised. If Meridian Holdings had enough reach to bury a CEO alive and escape immediate consequences, they certainly had enough reach to track police communications. He deleted the message without responding and turned off his phone's location services. Another step deeper into the shadows, another bridge burned. The old Ethan Cole, the one who followed rules and trusted institutions, was fading like smoke, replaced by someone who understood that survival sometimes meant operating outside the lines society drew. Lily emerged from the restroom holding a brochure she'd picked up inside. Daddy, look! It says Lopez Island has deer that aren't afraid of people, and beaches where you can find sand dollars, and a place called Shark Reef where you can see whales sometimes. Ethan took the brochure, grateful for her ability to find wonder even in uncertainty. That sounds pretty cool. Maybe when we get there, we can explore a little. Would you like that? Can we look for sand dollars? Absolutely. We'll find so many sand dollars you'll need a whole extra suitcase to carry them home. The promise felt fragile in his mouth, contingent on so many variables outside his control, but it made Lily smile, and that was worth the risk of disappointment. They reached the Anacortes ferry terminal just as the sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that seemed too beautiful for the darkness they were fleeing. The ferry to Lopez Island didn't leave for another hour, so Ethan parked in a corner of the lot with a clear view of all entrances and exits, his firefighter training automatically cataloging escape routes and potential threats. "Are we getting on a boat?" Lily asked, her voice rising with excitement. "A big one. It carries cars and everything. You've never been on a ferry before, have you?" Lily shook her head, her earlier melancholy forgotten in the face of this new adventure. Children were resilient in ways adults had forgotten how to be, capable of finding joy in small moments even when the larger picture was chaos. Ethan envied her that ability, even as he cherished it. While they waited, Ethan studied the other vehicles in the lot. A family minivan with kids fighting in the back seat. A couple of motorcycles with riders who looked like weekend warriors escaping office jobs. An expensive sedan with tinted windows that made Ethan's pulse quicken until he saw an elderly couple emerge, arguing good-naturedly about whether they'd packed enough sweaters. Nothing suspicious, nothing that screamed danger. But Ethan knew better than to relax. The men who'd chased them 2 nights ago had been professionals, and professionals were patient. They knew how to blend in, how to wait for the perfect moment to strike. His phone buzzed with another message, this time from a number he recognized. Clara. "Almost there?" He typed back. "At ferry terminal, 1 hour out." "Good. When you arrive, follow the coordinates exactly. Don't stop at the town, don't ask for directions. The house is equipped with everything you'll need. We'll talk when I arrive tomorrow." "You're not there yet?" "Complications at the hospital. They're not making it easy to leave, but I'll be there by tomorrow afternoon. Stay hidden until then." Ethan pocketed the phone, unease creeping up his spine. Clara was still in the hospital, still vulnerable, and he was about to take Lily to an isolated island to wait in a house he'd never seen. Every instinct screamed that this was a mistake, that he was walking into a trap, or at minimum taking an insane risk with his daughter's safety. But what was the alternative? Return to the cabin where armed men knew exactly where to find them? Trust the police protection that had already been compromised? Keep running until their meager resources ran out? No. This was the only path forward, however uncertain. Claire had saved herself by staying alive long enough for someone to hear her knocking. Now Ethan had to have the same faith, that if he held on, if he kept moving, if he refused to give up, somehow they'd find their way through this darkness. The ferry boarding announcement crackled over loudspeakers, and Ethan started the truck. They followed the line of vehicles onto the massive vessel, the truck's tires rumbling over the metal ramp. Ethan parked in the spot directed by the ferry worker, then helped Lily out so they could go up to the passenger deck. The ferry was surprisingly crowded for a weekday evening, tourists heading to the islands for long weekends, locals returning home from mainland shopping trips, cyclists with their bikes loaded with camping gear. Ethan and Lily found seats by a window where they could watch the water, and Lily pressed her face against the glass as the ferry pulled away from the dock. "It's so big," she breathed. "The ocean is so big." "That's actually the Puget Sound," Ethan corrected gently. "The ocean is even bigger." "How much bigger?" "So much bigger that you could fit 1,000 of these ferries in it and still have room for more." Lily's eyes went wide with wonder, and Ethan felt a moment of pure, simple joy watching her experience something new. Whatever else happened, whatever dangers lay ahead, he'd given her this, a ferry ride at sunset, a moment of childhood innocence preserved against impossible odds. The crossing took about 40 minutes, the ferry making stops at other islands before reaching Lopez. Ethan spent the time watching other passengers, looking for anyone who paid too much attention to them or who seemed out of place. An older man reading a thriller novel, a young couple taking selfies, a woman working on her laptop. All normal, all explicable. But Ethan's paranoia wouldn't quiet. He kept thinking about the man who'd come to the motel, the one Officer Chen had described with expensive boots and a security earpiece. That man had found them once. What was to stop him from finding them again? When the ferry docked at Lopez Island, Ethan and Lily returned to the truck and followed the line of vehicles off the boat. The island greeting them was everything the brochure had promised, forested and quiet, with narrow roads that wound between farms and forests. It felt like stepping back in time, to a slower, gentler version of the Pacific Northwest. Ethan pulled out the GPS coordinates Clara had sent and plugged them into his phone, then immediately regretted it. Using GPS meant creating a digital trail. He switched to the old paper map he kept in the glove compartment, translating the coordinates to a location on the island's southern shore, far from the main village. They drove through gathering darkness, passing farms where lights glowed warm in windows, and occasional deer grazed unconcerned by the roadside. True to the brochure, the deer barely looked up as they passed. Lily gasped with delight at each sighting, keeping count until she reached double digits. The road narrowed to barely more than a track as they approached Clara's safe house, trees pressing close on either side. Ethan's headlights caught a gate across the road, and he stopped, uncertain. But as he sat there, the gate swung open automatically, triggered by some sensor he couldn't see. He drove through, and in his rearview mirror he watched the gate close behind them. No turning back now. The house revealed itself gradually through the trees, a modern structure of glass and wood that somehow managed to feel both luxurious and camouflaged, built to blend into the forest around it. Solar panels gleamed on the roof, and Ethan could see security cameras positioned at strategic points. This wasn't just a house. It was a fortress disguised as a weekend retreat. He parked in front and sat for a moment, engine idling, studying the building. Lights were on inside, glowing through the large windows. Either Clara had remote control of the systems or someone was already here. "Is this where we're staying?" Lily asked. "It's like something from a movie." "Yeah, baby, this is it." Ethan killed the engine and grabbed the bag with their few belongings. "Stay close to me, okay? Let's make sure everything's safe before we get too comfortable." They approached the front door, which opened before Ethan could knock. A woman stood there, mid-50s, dressed in practical outdoor clothes, with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a bun and eyes that assessed Ethan and Lily with the cool efficiency of a professional. "Mr. Cole? I'm Margaret Reeves. Ms. Wexler asked me to prepare the house for your arrival and to stay on as security until she gets here tomorrow." She stepped aside, gesturing them in. "Please, come inside. You must be exhausted." Ethan hesitated. "How do I know Clara actually sent you?" Margaret smiled, a thin, knowing expression. "Smart. She said you'd be cautious. She told me to tell you that she still owes you 15 minutes. Does that mean anything to you?" It did. At the hospital, Clara had mentioned that Ethan found her with maybe 20 minutes of air left. If he'd been 15 minutes slower gathering firewood, she'd be dead. It was a detail that hadn't appeared in any police report, something only the two of them would know. "Okay," Ethan said, relaxing fractionally. "We're coming in." The interior of the safe house was stunning. Vaulted ceilings, large windows overlooking the forest, furniture that managed to be both comfortable and stylish. But what caught Ethan's attention were the security features barely hidden beneath the aesthetic veneer. Reinforced door frames, bulletproof glass, panic buttons positioned at strategic locations. This place was built to keep people safe from serious threats. "There are 3 bedrooms upstairs," Margaret said. "I've prepared 2 of them for you. The kitchen is fully stocked, and there's a playroom for your daughter with books and games. The security system is state-of-the-art, motion sensors, cameras, and direct alerts to Ms. Wexler's private security team. You're safe here." Lily tugged on Ethan's sleeve. "Can I go see the playroom?" Ethan looked to Margaret, who nodded. "Up the stairs, second door on the left. You'll see the toys through the window." Lily took off at a run, her resilience and adaptability once again astonishing Ethan. Within seconds, he heard her delighted exclamation as she discovered whatever treasures Clara had stocked the room with. "She's been through a lot," Margaret observed. "Ms. Wexler briefed me on the situation. What you both witnessed, what you've been through. It's remarkable you're handling it as well as you are." "I'm not sure I'd call this handling it," Ethan said. "More like barely keeping my head above water." "That's still swimming. A lot of people would have drowned by now." Margaret moved to the kitchen and began preparing tea with the ease of someone comfortable in any environment. "Ms. Wexler also asked me to go over security protocols with you. There are panic buttons in every room. Press 1 and armed response will be here in under 10 minutes. Don't open the door for anyone you don't recognize. Don't leave the property without notifying me first. And most importantly, don't use your personal phone for anything. There's a secure line in the office if you need to make calls." Ethan accepted the tea she handed him, grateful for the warmth. "How long have you worked for Clara?" 5 years. I was with Secret Service before that, Presidential Protection Detail." When I retired, Ms. Wexler hired me to oversee her personal security. Margaret's expression darkened slightly. I failed her. I should have seen the threat coming, should have had better protocols in place. What happened to her is on me. You can't predict every threat. It's literally my job to predict threats. Margaret's voice was hard. But I'll tell you this. Whoever did this to her is going to regret it. Miss Wexler is not the forgiving type, and neither am I. There was something almost comforting about Margaret's cold determination. Ethan had spent the past 2 days feeling alone and overwhelmed, but here was someone who clearly knew what she was doing, who was prepared to fight back against the forces arrayed against them. These people, Meridian Holdings, they're powerful, Ethan said. Clara told me they have government connections, resources, people willing to kill. How do we fight that? The same way you fight any bully, by exposing them. Miss Wexler has been gathering evidence for months, building a case that can't be ignored or suppressed. She has documents, recordings, financial trails that prove what Meridian has been doing. All she needs now is to get that evidence to the right people without being killed in the process. And where do I fit into this? Margaret studied him over her tea. You're the witness, the person who can testify to the attempted murder, who can identify the men involved. But more than that, you're proof that Miss Wexler isn't paranoid or delusional. You're the outside validation that makes her claims credible. The weight of that settled on Ethan's shoulders like a physical burden. His testimony could help bring down a corrupt organization, or it could get him and Lily killed. There was no middle ground, no safe option that let them walk away unscathed. Upstairs, Lily was singing to herself, a cheerful sound that floated down through the open floor plan. For her sake, for her future, Ethan had to see this through. Because even if they ran, even if they hid for the rest of their lives, Lily would grow up in fear, always looking over her shoulder, always wondering when the past would catch up to them. Better to fight now, while they had allies and resources. Better to end this than to let it fester. Okay, Ethan said. I'm in. Whatever Clara needs from me, whatever I have to do, I'm in. Margaret nodded with satisfaction. Good. Now get some rest. Tomorrow when Ms. Wexler arrives, the real work begins. Ethan spent the evening settling Lily into her room, a space that looked like it had been designed specifically for a young girl, with a comfortable bed, shelves full of books, and even a few stuffed animals that Lily immediately adopted. He read her 3 stories before she finally dozed off, Mr. Hoppy tucked under her arm. Standing in the doorway watching his daughter sleep, Ethan felt the full weight of the past few days crash over him. He'd gone from barely surviving as a single father to being a key witness in what was essentially a war between a billionaire CEO and a corrupt military contractor. It was absurd. It was terrifying. It was completely outside anything his life had prepared him for. But he'd also discovered reserves of strength he'd thought were gone, burned away along with his firefighting career. The man who'd dug Clara out of the ground, who'd fought off armed attackers, who'd navigated police interrogations and made the decision to go off the grid, that man was someone Ethan had thought he'd lost in the flames. Maybe he'd been there all along, just waiting for a reason to emerge. He was heading to his own room when his secure phone buzzed, a message from Clara. Complications resolved. Leaving hospital now. Will arrive at safe house by noon tomorrow. How is Lily? Ethan typed back. She's adapting, counting deer and excited about sand dollars. How are you? Alive, thanks to you. That's enough for now. Get some sleep, Ethan. Tomorrow we plan how to end this. Sleep came in fits and starts, interrupted by dreams of knocking sounds and hands pressing against glass. Ethan woke several times, each time checking to make sure Lily was still safely asleep in her room, that the security system showed no breaches, that the nightmare was just a dream and not reality bleeding through. Dawn broke gray and misty, the kind of Pacific Northwest morning where the world seemed wrapped in gauze. Ethan showered and dressed, then went downstairs to find Margaret already up and making breakfast. The smell of coffee and bacon was so achingly normal that for a moment Ethan could almost pretend they were just on vacation. Ms. Wexler will be here in about 4 hours, Margaret said, sliding a plate of eggs and bacon across the counter. Eat. You'll need your strength. Lily wandered down soon after, rubbing sleep from her eyes, and Margaret served her the same breakfast with a gentleness that contradicted her tough exterior. They ate together at the large kitchen table, and Ethan found himself relaxing despite everything. There was something about this place, about Margaret's competent presence, that made him feel safe for the first time in days. After breakfast, Ethan took Lily for a walk around the property under Margaret's watchful eye. The safe house sat on about 5 acres of forested land with a trail that wound down to a small rocky beach. Lily's eyes lit up when she saw the water, and she immediately began searching the tide pools for sand dollars and starfish. "Look, Daddy, a purple one!" Ethan crouched beside her, examining the starfish clinging to a rock. "That's pretty cool. Did you know starfish can regenerate their arms if they lose one?" "Really? That's like a superpower." "Nature has lots of superpowers if you know where to look." They spent an hour at the beach, Lily collecting treasures in her pockets, while Ethan kept one eye on the forest and water, still unable to fully let his guard down. But gradually, the peace of the place worked its way into his bones. Birds sang in the trees. Waves lapped gently at the shore. The morning mist burned off to reveal blue sky. It was almost enough to make him forget they were hiding from people who wanted them dead. Margaret met them on the path back to the house. "Ms. Wexler just arrived. She's waiting inside." Ethan felt his pulse quicken. This was it, the moment when they'd move from passive survival to active resistance. He took Lily's hand and they walked together back to the house, her pockets heavy with beach treasures, his mind heavy with what was to come. Clara stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the forest, and when she turned to face them, Ethan was struck by the transformation. Gone was the broken woman he'd pulled from the coffin. This Clara was composed, determined, dressed in dark jeans and a sweater that probably cost more than Ethan's truck. But her eyes still carried shadows of what she'd endured. "Ethan," she said, her voice warm, "thank you for coming. And you must be Lily. Your dad has told me what a brave girl you are." Lily hid partially behind Ethan's leg, suddenly shy. "Hi." "I have something for you," Clara said, producing a small box. "A thank you gift for sharing your dad with me. Would you like to see?" Lily looked up at Ethan, who nodded permission. She approached Clara slowly and accepted the box, opening it to reveal a delicate bracelet made of sea glass in various colors. Lily's face lit up. "It's beautiful." "I'm glad you like it. The sea glass comes from beaches right here on the island. Each piece is unique, shaped by the ocean over many years." Clara helped Lily fasten the bracelet, then looked up at Ethan. "Can we talk? Margaret can take Lily back to the playroom if that's all right." Ethan squeezed Lily's shoulder. "Go ahead, baby. I'll come check on you in a little bit." After Lily left with Margaret, Clara gestured to the comfortable couches arranged around a fireplace. "Please, sit. We have a lot to discuss." Ethan sat, and Clara settled across from him, her movements careful in a way that reminded him she was still recovering from her ordeal. For a moment neither spoke, the weight of shared trauma hanging between them. "How are you really?" Ethan asked finally. "Terrified," Clara admitted. "Angry, determined, all of it at once. The doctors wanted me to stay another week for observation, but every hour I spent in that hospital was an hour they could find me again. So here I am, probably against medical advice, but at least I'm somewhere they don't know about." "Are you sure they don't know about this place?" "As sure as I can be. This property is owned by a shell company 3 layers deep. I bought it years ago as a contingency, and I've never told anyone about it except Margaret. No paper trail, no digital footprint. It's as close to invisible as you can get in the modern world." Ethan wanted to be reassured, but he'd learned enough about Meridian Holdings to know they had resources beyond normal comprehension. "Clara, at the hospital you told me about what you found. The illegal arms deals, the money laundering. But what exactly do you have? What proof?" Clara stood and walked to a safe hidden behind a painting. Of course there was a safe, Ethan thought, and retrieved a small hard drive. Everything. Financial records showing wire transfers to sanctioned countries, communications between Meridian executives and foreign agents, video footage of weapons shipments. It's all here, and it's all authenticated and encrypted. This drive represents years of their illegal operations. Why haven't you already gone public with it? Because going public without the right channels means either being discredited as a conspiracy theorist or ending up dead before the story gains traction. I need to deliver this simultaneously to multiple news outlets, to congressional oversight committees, To the FBI and DOJ. I need to create such a firestorm that Meridian can't suppress it. Clara set the hard drive on the coffee table between them like it was a live grenade. But I can't do that if I'm dead, which is why they tried to bury me. And now? Now we have something they don't expect. You. A credible witness to attempted murder who has no connection to me or my company. Someone who can testify to what they did, who can put faces to the men involved. Combined with this evidence, your testimony makes the entire case airtight. Ethan stared at the hard drive, understanding the magnitude of what Clara was proposing. You want me to testify in front of Congress? Or in court? Both, probably. I want to destroy Meridian Holdings so completely that no one will ever think about doing what they did. But more than that, I want justice. Not just for me, but for everyone they've hurt over the years. All the people they've killed in their illegal operations. All the families destroyed by weapons they shouldn't have sold. All the corruption they've enabled. The scope of it was dizzying. Ethan was just a single father trying to keep his daughter safe, and now he was being asked to help topple a multi-million-dollar criminal enterprise with tentacles reaching into government. What if I can't? He asked quietly. What if I testify and it's not enough? What if they come after Lily to keep me quiet? Clara's expression softened. Then I'll use every resource I have to protect her. I'll set you both up with new identities, new lives, all the money you'll ever need. But Ethan, I truly believe this is our best chance at safety. Running means living in fear forever. Fighting back means maybe, just maybe, ending the threat permanently. And if we lose, if they're more powerful than we think, then at least we went down fighting. Clara leaned forward, her intensity burning through her physical exhaustion. I've spent my entire career building systems to protect people from threats, but I failed to protect myself. I let them catch me. Let them bury me. Let them almost win. You gave me a second chance at life, Ethan. Now I want to use that chance to make sure they can never do this to anyone else. Ethan thought about Lily, about the life he wanted for her. A life free from fear, where she didn't have to look over her shoulder or wonder if the bad men were coming back. Clara was offering a path to that life, dangerous as it was. Okay, he said, the word feeling both heavy and liberating. Tell me what you need me to do. Clara smiled, a real smile, the first he'd seen from her. First, we document everything. I'll record your full testimony on video, every detail you remember. Then we coordinate with journalists I trust, with my contacts at the FBI who aren't compromised, with congressional staffers who've been investigating military contractors. We build an overwhelming case. How long will that take? A few days for the prep work, then we go public simultaneously across multiple channels. After that, Clara's smile turned grim. After that, all hell breaks loose, and we'd better be somewhere very safe when it does. Margaret returned then, Lily in tow. We have a situation. Perimeter sensors just picked up a vehicle approaching on the access road. No one should know about this road. The piece shattered like glass. Ethan was on his feet instantly, moving toward Lily. Clara grabbed the hard drive and moved toward the safe. How far out? Clara demanded. 2 minutes, maybe less. Do we evacuate? Margaret shook her head. The access road is the only way out. If they're hostile, we'd be driving straight into them. Better to ford up here. The house is designed for this. Ethan picked up Lily, who'd gone very quiet and still in his arms. What do we do? Safe room, Clara said, pointing to a door Ethan had assumed led to a closet. It's reinforced, has its own air supply and communications. If they breach the house, you take Lily there and lock yourselves in. Margaret and I will handle the rest. I'm not hiding while you fight, Ethan protested. You're protecting your daughter, Margaret said firmly. That's not hiding. That's the most important job here. Through the windows, Ethan could see headlights approaching through the trees. His heart hammered against his ribs. After everything, the escape from the cabin, the ferry ride, the false sense of safety, they'd been found anyway. Clara moved to a control panel and tapped a series of commands. Heavy steel shutters began descending over the windows with a mechanical whir. Lights flickered to backup systems. The house was transforming from a peaceful retreat into the fortress it had always been designed to be. Margaret, identify that vehicle, Clara commanded. Margaret was already at a security monitor pulling up camera feeds. She zoomed in on the approaching car, a black sedan, expensive but not the same SUVs from the cabin. The driver was alone, and as the cameras caught the face, Margaret relaxed slightly. "Stand down. It's Thomas." "Thomas?" Clara's tension eased. "What's he doing here?" "I called him this morning, told him about the situation. He must have decided we needed backup." The sedan pulled up to the house, and a man emerged, late 30s, built like someone who'd spent time in military service, moving with the casual confidence of a professional. He looked up at the cameras and held up his credentials. Clara opened the front door remotely, and the man entered, his eyes immediately scanning the room and assessing threats. When he saw Clara, relief flooded his features. "Ma'am, I came as soon as I heard. Are you all right?" "I'm fine, Thomas. This is Ethan Cole and his daughter Lily, the ones I told you about. Ethan, this is Thomas Briggs, head of my personal security team." Thomas extended a hand to Ethan, his grip firm and professional. "Mr. Cole, Margaret briefed me on what you did for Ms. Wexler. Thank you. Not many civilians would have had the courage." "I just did what anyone would do," Ethan said, though he knew it wasn't true. "Most people wouldn't have dug," Thomas said simply. He turned to Clara. "Ma'am, we need to talk about your security posture. What happened to you represents a catastrophic failure of our systems. I've been analyzing how they got to you, and I believe there's a leak in your company, someone feeding information to Meridian." Clara's expression hardened. "Do you know who?" "I have suspicions, but right now the priority is keeping you safe while we prepare to go public with your evidence. I've brought additional security, 3 more of my people who I'd trust with my life. They're staging at a rental property 2 miles from here, ready to respond if needed." The professional competence of Clara's team was both reassuring and frightening. This was really happening. They were preparing for war against an organization that had already demonstrated its willingness to kill. Lily stirred in Ethan's arms. "Daddy, I'm scared." "I know, baby, but see all these people? They're all here to keep us safe. We're going to be okay." Thomas looked at Lily with surprising gentleness. "You know what, Lily? Your dad is one of the bravest people I've ever heard about. And brave people don't let their families get hurt. You're in good hands." For the rest of this day, the safe house buzzed with activity as Thomas and Margaret established security protocols, as Clara and Ethan worked on documenting his testimony, as plans were made and contingencies established. Lily stayed close to Ethan, coloring in the playroom when the adult conversation became too intense, sensing that something momentous was building. By evening, they had the framework of a plan. In 3 days, they would release everything: the evidence, Ethan's testimony, Clara's own account of being buried alive. They would send it to major news outlets, to congressional oversight committees, to the FBI and DOJ simultaneously. They would create a media firestorm that Meridian Holdings couldn't suppress or spin, and then they would hope that justice moved faster than revenge. As night fell and Lily finally settled into sleep, Ethan stood at the window of his room, looking out at the dark forest. The shutters had been raised once Thomas confirmed the perimeter was secure, and through the glass he could see stars beginning to emerge. 3 days. In 3 days, either they would win or they would lose everything. Either Meridian Holdings would fall or the Cole family would be running for the rest of their lives. But as Ethan watched those stars, constant and enduring despite the darkness between them, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: purpose. He was fighting not just for survival, but for something larger, for justice, for accountability, for a world where people couldn't be buried alive and forgotten. The mountains had taught him that survival wasn't enough. You had to live with purpose, with meaning, with the determination to make each day count. And for the next 3 days, Ethan Cole would do exactly that. The next morning arrived with fog so thick it turned the world beyond the windows into an impenetrable white wall, as if the safe house existed in a pocket dimension separate from reality. Ethan woke to find Lily already up and sitting cross-legged on her bed, arranging her beach treasures from yesterday in careful rows on the nightstand. Shells organized by size, sea glass sorted by color. The bracelet Clara had given her positioned like a crown jewel among the collection. "Morning, sweetheart," Ethan said, his voice rough with sleep and the remnants of dreams he couldn't quite remember but knew had been troubled. "The world disappeared," Lily said, pointing at the window where only white existed. "Like we're inside a cloud." It's just fog. It'll burn off when the sun gets higher. I know, but it's like we're invisible. Like the bad people couldn't find us even if they tried because we're hidden in magic. Ethan sat on the edge of her bed, struck by her ability to find wonder even in circumstances that would break most adults. You might be right about that. Maybe this island has a little magic after all. Downstairs, the safe house had transformed into something resembling a military operations center. Thomas had brought in equipment overnight, laptops, secure communication systems, what looked like tactical gear stored in hard cases. Margaret was at one of the laptops, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she monitored something Ethan couldn't identify. Clara sat at the dining table with Thomas, papers and files spread between them, their conversation low and intense. Clara looked up when Ethan and Lily appeared on the stairs. "Good morning. Did you sleep?" "Some," Ethan said, which was generous. He'd managed maybe 4 hours broken into 20-minute segments, jerking awake each time convinced he heard knocking sounds, or footsteps, or Lily crying out. "What's all this?" "Final preparations," Thomas said. "We're moving up the timeline. Originally we planned to wait 3 days, but new intelligence suggests Meridian knows Ms. Wexler survived. They're actively searching for her, which means we need to go public before they find us." Ethan felt his stomach drop. "How much are we moving it up?" "Tomorrow night," Clara said. "I know it's fast, but we don't have a choice. Every hour we wait is an hour they're getting closer." Margaret looked up from her laptop. "We've confirmed at least 3 teams deployed to the Pacific Northwest. They're questioning people, bribing ferry workers, checking hotels and rental properties. They're thorough and they're motivated. It's only a matter of time." Lily tugged on Ethan's hand, sensing the tension in the room, even if she didn't understand the specifics. "Daddy, can we have breakfast?" "Of course, baby." Ethan looked at Clara. "Can we talk after? About what tomorrow night means? What you need from me?" "Absolutely. Take care of your daughter first. The war can wait 20 minutes. Ethan made pancakes while Lily sat at the kitchen counter and told him elaborate stories about the sea glass in her bracelet, where each piece had come from, what adventures it had experienced before the ocean had tumbled it smooth. Her imagination was boundless, turning simple debris into treasures with histories spanning decades and continents. Ethan let her words wash over him, grateful for the normalcy of making breakfast and listening to his daughter's stories, even as part of his mind churned through everything that needed to happen in the next 36 hours. After Lily was settled in the playroom with a movie, Ethan returned to the dining table where Clara had cleared away everything except a tablet and a small stack of folders. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide, but her determination burned as bright as ever. "How much do you know about how the news cycle works?" Clara asked. Ethan shook his head. "Not much. I watch the local news sometimes, but that's about it." "Then let me give you the crash course. In the modern media environment, timing is everything. Release a story at the wrong moment, and it gets buried under other news. Release it right, and it explodes across every platform simultaneously." Clara pulled up a calendar on her tablet. "Tomorrow night, we're releasing everything at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. That's 5 p.m. here, right as the evening news cycles are starting. We're coordinating with 4 major newspapers, 3 network news divisions, 2 online investigative journalism outlets, and sending the full evidence package to 6 different congressional committees." "All at once?" "All at once. That's the only way to make sure it can't be suppressed. Meridian has influence over individual news organizations and politicians, but they can't control everyone simultaneously. By the time they realize what's happening, the story will be everywhere." Thomas joined them, setting down a laptop showing what looked like a presentation. "We've also prepared a video statement from you, Mr. Cole. Your testimony about finding Ms. Wexler, the chase, the men who tried to kill you. It's powerful stuff. Combined with her story and the documentary evidence, it creates a narrative that's impossible to ignore." Ethan had recorded that testimony yesterday, sitting in front of a camera and walking through every detail of that night in the woods. It had been harder than he'd expected, reliving those moments, seeing them through the lens of how others would perceive them. But Clara had been right that his perspective as a complete outsider, someone with no stake in corporate warfare or government contracts, gave the story a credibility it wouldn't otherwise have. "What happens after we release everything?" Ethan asked. "What's the response going to be?" Clara and Thomas exchanged a glance, and Ethan knew he wasn't going to like the answer. Chaos, Clara said bluntly. Meridian will deny everything, claim the evidence is fabricated, attack our credibility. They'll deploy their lawyers and PR firms and political connections. The media will become a battlefield, with some outlets believing us and others defending Meridian. Congressional hearings will be scheduled. The FBI will open investigations. It'll be a feeding frenzy. And during all that chaos, we stay hidden, Thomas said, right here or at other safe locations I've prepared. Because while the legal and political machinery slowly grinds toward justice, Meridian will be trying to silence the witnesses. That means you, Ms. Wexler, and anyone else who can testify against them. For how long? Weeks, probably, maybe months, until enough people in power have seen the evidence and committed to prosecuting that Meridian understands killing witnesses would only make things worse. Thomas's expression was grim. It's going to be a difficult period, but if we can survive it, if we can stay alive and out of their reach until the legal process locks them down, we win. Ethan thought about Lily, about asking a 7-year-old to live in hiding for weeks or months, unable to go to school or see friends or live any semblance of a normal life. The cost of doing the right thing kept getting higher. There's another option, Clara said quietly. I can release everything without your testimony, just my evidence, my story. You and Lily can disappear. New identities, new life, all the resources you need to start over somewhere safe. You've already done more than anyone could ask. The offer was tempting, so tempting that Ethan felt it in his bones like a physical pull. He could take Lily and run, let Clara fight this battle on her own, protect his daughter from the worst of what was coming. But he knew he couldn't. Because running meant Lily would grow up knowing her father had walked away when things got hard, had chosen safety over justice. And what kind of lesson was that? What kind of man would he be? No, Ethan said. We're seeing this through, together, whatever it takes. Clara's eyes shimmered with something that might have been tears. Thank you. You have no idea what that means to me. I think I do. You didn't give up when they buried you. You kept knocking, kept fighting, kept breathing. That's what we're doing now, just on a bigger scale. Margaret called out from her position at the laptops. We have movement. Security cameras picked up a boat near the southern shore, just sitting there. Could be fishermen, but the timing's suspicious. Thomas was at her side immediately, studying the monitor. How long has it been there? About 20 minutes. Haven't seen any fishing activity, no lines in the water, just drifting. Run the registration. Margaret's fingers flew over the keyboard. It's a rental out of Friday Harbor. Rented yesterday afternoon to a James Morrison. Running that name now. Ethan moved to where he could see the monitor. The boat was maybe a quarter-mile offshore, a standard fishing vessel that could belong to anyone. But something about the way it sat in the water, motionless despite the current, made his skin crawl. Name's fake, Margaret announced. James Morrison doesn't exist in any database I can access. The credit card used for the rental is flagged as possibly fraudulent. They found us, Clara said, her voice tight. We need to assume that boat is surveillance, which means they know we're here and they're planning their approach. Thomas was already moving, pulling out his phone and making calls. I'm bringing in the rest of my team. We need to establish a perimeter and prepare for possible assault. Assault? Ethan felt his heart rate spike. You mean they might attack the house? If they're desperate enough, yes. These people buried Miss Wexler alive. They shot at you and your daughter. They've already demonstrated they're willing to use extreme violence. Thomas's voice was calm but firm. We need to prepare for the worst-case scenario. Ethan thought of Lily in the playroom, innocently watching a movie while armed men might be preparing to storm their location. The juxtaposition of childhood innocence and adult violence made him feel sick. I need to get Lily to the safe room, Ethan said. Not yet, Margaret countered. If this is just surveillance, moving her now might tip them off that we've noticed them. We need to act normal while we prepare. Normal? Ethan's voice rose. How am I supposed to act normal when there's a boatload of killers watching us? Clara placed a hand on his arm. By trusting us. Thomas and Margaret have handled situations like this before. Let them do their jobs while you focus on keeping Lily calm and ready to move if necessary. It went against every protective instinct Ethan had, but he forced himself to nod. He returned to the playroom where Lily was sprawled on the floor, completely absorbed in her movie. She looked so small, so vulnerable, so utterly unprepared for the darkness that adult choices could bring into a child's life. "Hey, sweetheart," Ethan said, sitting down beside her. "I need to talk to you about something." Lily paused the movie and turned to him, her expression immediately serious. "Are the bad men coming?" The question hit Ethan like a punch. Lily had learned to read situations, to understand when adults were scared even if they tried to hide it. She'd grown up too fast, learned too young that the world contained threats that even parents couldn't always stop. "We're not sure," Ethan said honestly. "But Clara's security people are very good at their jobs, and they're making sure we're safe. I need you to do something for me, though. If I tell you we need to go to the safe room, that special room Clara showed us, I need you to go quickly and without asking questions. Can you do that? Will you be with me?" "Every second. I'm not leaving you, Lily. Not ever." Lily nodded, her small face set with a determination that broke Ethan's heart. "Okay, Daddy. I'll be brave." "You're already the bravest person I know." They sat together watching the movie, Ethan only half paying attention, his ears tuned to the sounds from the main room where Thomas was coordinating with his team. He heard phrases like defensive positions and evacuation routes and rules of engagement, each one ramping up his anxiety another notch. An hour passed, then two. The boat remained offshore, not moving, not fishing, just existing as a silent threat. Thomas's additional security arrived, 3 more professionals who looked like they could handle themselves in any situation. They took up positions around the property, turning the safe house into an actual fortress. Ethan tried to keep Lily entertained, playing board games and reading books, but his mind was elsewhere. He kept thinking about that night in the woods, about the sound of bullets hitting his truck, about how close they'd come to dying. That could happen again. Here, today. Clara joined them in the playroom around noon, her presence a welcome distraction. "Mind if I hang out with you two for a bit?" The tactical discussions were getting a little intense. "Please," Ethan said, "we could use the company." Clara sat down with them, and to Ethan's surprise, she was wonderful with Lily. She asked about the sea glass bracelet, admired Lily's collection of beach treasures, and even got down on the floor to help build an elaborate tower out of blocks. For a little while, the weight of what they were facing lifted, replaced by simple human connection. "You're good with kids," Ethan observed. Claire's expression flickered with something sad. "I always wanted children. But building a company takes everything you have. I kept telling myself there would be time later, after the business was stable, after I'd achieved certain goals. And then suddenly I was 37 and single and running a company worth hundreds of millions, and the opportunity had passed. It's not too late. Maybe. If I survive this." Clara helped Lily place another block on the increasingly precarious tower. "You know what being buried alive teaches you? That all the money and success and achievement in the world means nothing if you die alone in the dark. The only thing I thought about in that coffin was regret. All the things I'd sacrificed in pursuit of goals that suddenly seemed meaningless." "But you also built something that matters," Ethan said. "Your company protects people, keeps them safe from threats. That's not meaningless." "No, but I lost balance. Let the work become everything at the expense of relationships, family, life itself." Clara watched Lily carefully position a block. "You have something precious here, Ethan. Don't let anyone take that from you. Don't let the pursuit of justice or revenge or anything else cost you what really matters." Before Ethan could respond, Margaret's voice cut through the house. "We have multiple vehicles approaching. Fast. 3 trucks, coming up the access road." The tower of blocks tumbled as Ethan jerked to his feet. Clara was right behind him, her face pale but composed. They reached the main room where Thomas had pulled up security feeds showing 3 large trucks barreling toward the house. "Safe room, now," Thomas commanded. "Margaret, lockdown protocols. Everyone else, defensive positions." Ethan scooped up Lily and ran for the safe room, Clara right behind them. The door was hidden in what looked like a wall panel, and it swung open at Clara's touch to reveal a small but well-equipped space. Reinforced walls, its own air system, communication equipment, and enough supplies to last days if necessary. "Inside," Clara urged, but Ethan hesitated. "You're coming too, right?" In a moment. I need to help Thomas with the security systems. Get Lily settled, and I'll be right there. Ethan wanted to argue, wanted to insist they all go in together, but Lily was crying now, frightened by the sudden panic, and his first duty was to her. He carried her inside the safe room and set her down on the small cot against one wall. It's okay, baby. We're safe in here. Nothing can hurt us. Through the open door, he could see chaos in the main room. Thomas and his team were moving with military precision, weapons drawn, communicating in rapid shorthand. Margaret was at the security controls, her face illuminated by multiple monitors showing the approaching trucks. The trucks screeched to a halt outside the house. Men poured out, 6, 8, 10 of them, all armed, all moving with the coordination of a trained assault team. They wore tactical gear but no identifying marks, their faces partially obscured by dark glasses and ball caps. One of them raised a bullhorn. "Clara Wexler, we know you're in there. Come out peacefully, and no one else needs to get hurt." Thomas positioned himself by the reinforced door, his weapon ready but not visible through the armored windows. They're not getting in without serious explosives. The question is whether they have that kind of firepower. Even if they do, police response time is 20 minutes, Margaret said. I've already triggered the silent alarm. Local sheriff and state police are en route. The man with the bullhorn tried again. "Ms. Wexler, you're only making this harder on yourself. We just want to talk, to hear your side of things. Come out and we can resolve this peacefully." "They're lying," Clara said flatly. "They're here to kill everyone and destroy the evidence. That's the only way this ends for them." Ethan pulled Lily close, covering her ears even though he knew she could still hear everything. This was a nightmare, the exact scenario they'd tried so hard to avoid. But they were trapped now. No way out except through the armed men surrounding the house. One of the attackers approached the front door, carrying something in his hands. Thomas tensed. "Breaching charge! Everyone down!" The explosion was deafening even through the reinforced walls. Lily screamed, and Ethan covered her body with his own as debris and sound washed over them. When he looked up, smoke filled the main room, but the door had held, dented and scorched, but still intact. "Return fire," Thomas commanded, and suddenly the safe house erupted with the sound of gunshots. Thomas's team fired through reinforced gun ports designed into the walls, laying down suppressive fire that forced the attackers to take cover behind their trucks. "Clara, get in the safe room now," Thomas shouted. But Clara was at the security controls with Margaret, doing something on the laptop that Ethan couldn't see. "Not yet. I'm uploading everything to the cloud, to backup servers they can't access. If we die here, the evidence survives." "Upload faster!" The attackers regrouped and opened fire on the house, bullets pinging off reinforced windows and walls. The sound was like being inside a hailstorm made of metal and death. One of Thomas's team members took a hit, the bullet penetrating through a gun port and catching him in the shoulder. He went down hard, and another team member dragged him away from the line of fire. 57% uploaded, Clara announced, her voice steady despite the chaos. "We don't have time for 100%. Thomas fired another burst through the gun port. "Get in that safe room." Ethan couldn't just sit there anymore. He settled Lily on the cot, looked her in the eyes, and said, "Stay right here. Don't move. Don't make a sound. I'll be right back." "Daddy, no. I have to help them, baby. I love you." He left her there, every instinct screaming at him to stay, but unable to remain passive while people fought to protect them. He ran to where the wounded security guard lay, pressing his hands against the shoulder wound to slow the bleeding. His firefighter first aid training kicked in, muscle memory guiding his actions. 73%, Clara called out. Another explosion rocked the house. A second breaching charge, this one on the back door. Thomas split his team, sending 2 to cover the new threat while he maintained the front. "They're trying to flank us," Margaret said, her voice tight. "If they breach both doors simultaneously, they won't." Thomas's certainty was absolute. "Those doors are rated for military assault. They'd need heavy explosives we'd have detected them bringing." 88%. The firefight intensified. Ethan finished bandaging the wounded guard as best he could, then looked around for how else he could help. Clara was still at the laptop, her fingers flying over the keys even as bullets struck the walls around her. Margaret coordinated communications with the police, giving them real-time updates on the situation. In the distance, sirens began to wail.